Alright, today I am reading The Journey Back, Chapter 7, Harden the Heart. Slowly, I baby-stepped through the shadows, trying not to crunch any leaves or make any noise. Lucky for me, there was a good bit of moonlight. Between the tree branches, I could see it reflect off the water, making a sparkly silver path across the Potomac River. When I got close to the campsite, I kneeled down. I was close enough to see a few glowing embers from a dying fire and make up the silhouette of two different tents. To my right, not far away, several bicycles leaned against the tree, almost all of them with saddlebags over their rear wheels. I crept up over to the bikes and ran my hands over one. I didn't feel a lock or a chain on it. Guess these campers thought they were safe out in the woods. I explored all the saddlebags looking for food, but no luck. I went back to the bike on the outside of the pile and could tell from the fat, knobby tires and the thread that it was a mountain bike. I knew a kid back at school had a mountain bike with 24 gears that cost like over $1,000. He let me ride it once, over a cornfield, down a gully and into the woods. It was awesome. In the dark, the mountain bike's metal handlebars were cool and smooth beneath my fingers. The bike had the twist shifter instead of the trigger kind. You twisted back for easier gears, forward for the harder ones. Quietly, I picked the bike up and moved it a few feet to the trail. Looking back at the camp, I suddenly noticed that overhead, hanging by a rope in a tree, were several backpacks. That would be their food, I guessed, strung up to keep it away from critters. With my eyes, I followed the line of rope to where it was anchored to a nearby tree. Piece of cake, I thought, untying the knot at the base of the tree and slowly letting the rope out. When the backpacks were on the ground, I fumbled with the knot on the rope, but it was too complicated, so I pulled out the knife I stole from the trucker, opened the big blade, and sawed it through. After pausing to listen again, I folded and slid the knife back in my pocket. I picked up one backpack and was about to explore what it had inside when I stepped on a big stick that snapped in half with a loud crack. Immediately, I heard a voice from one tent, then two voices, then a click, then light spilled out of one of the other tents. Quickly, I put the backpack on, dashed for the bike, and hopped on. "Hey!" someone called after me. "Stop!" I slammed my feet on the pedals and pedaled like a madman, twisting the shifter forward to put the bike into a harder gear so I could cover more ground. But the gears went crazy and the pedals spun around with no traction at all. "Come back here, you thief!" one of the campers called out. Finally, the gears caught. I practically jumped on the pedals to get the bike going and pumped hard, zipping into the black tunnel. I had to imagine the path when it disappeared. Imagining wasn't good enough because right away I smashed into the brick wall dripping with water and got scraped off the bike. I hit my head hard and sat on the ground stunned. Forcing myself up, I grabbed the bike's handlebars and started running while pushing the bike beside me. I kept it between me and the wooden railing, hoping the railing would stop me from falling into the murky canal. A little glimmer of light ahead gave me something to aim toward. I hopped back on the bike and pedaled furiously again, flying out the other end of the tunnel, like a guy whose pants were on fire. With only moonlight, it's a miracle I stayed on the towpath as long as I did. I leaned forward and kept pedaling. I covered a lot of ground this way too, maybe as much as a mile before the accident. I don't know what I hit, but all at once I was off the towpath in the air and crashing hard against the ground. When I got my bearings, I realized the backpack was gone, and that in another inch I would be over the edge into the stew pot of a canal. In a panic, I patted the ground all around me, found the backpack, and threw it back on. I lifted the bike by the handlebars, but when I hopped on it, it wouldn't go, and I could tell that the front tire was punctured. The bike wasn't going anywhere anymore. With both hands, I picked up the bike and heaved it deep into the brush. Then I took off running into the woods. I paused once to listen, and when I heard voices and saw a tiny headlight approaching, I threw myself flat on the ground. Seconds seems like minutes when you've got your face pushed into a bunch of dirt and wet plants that had who know what kind of insects crawling all over them. But this is a weird thing to say. I also kind of liked it. I bet the Marines did stuff like this all the time. It was a challenge, but it was saving me, and I knew I could live through it, that I could endure it. Boy, and I knew that word endure. It was on a 6th grade spelling test once. Endure means to harden the heart, to hold out, to last. I remember when my teacher read the definition for that word out loud. how I dropped my head and slid down in my chair. Even my face got hot, because that teacher could have been talking about me. That word endure implied to, my whole life. I had hardened my heart all right. I stopped crying in about the 5th grade, and some nights, the whole night when I was a kid. I slept in my own backyard at home so my dad couldn't find me during one of his rages. When we still had the big truck, I'd curl up in the sleeper. But he found me there once and whooped me good. So I got me this other spot behind the tool shed where I made a shelter with sheet metal, old tires, and a broken down lounge chair. So no, I never forgot that word endure. I lived that word. I kept taking shallow breaths and listened. Soon 2 bikers cruised by on the towpath with their little bouncing lights. They didn't see their bike in the bushes. More important, they didn't see me. When I figured they were far down the path, I stood up. But instead of returning to the towpath, I walked along the woods to the edge of the river. It was rough walking. In some places, there was no beach at all, just rocks. Big, small, round, sharp, all kinds of rocks. I ended up in the water half the time, but I waited quietly, close to the shore, and kind of hunched over so I couldn't be seen. One time, I had to climb over a bunch of boulders, and one of my boots slipped. I went down hard. The backpack broke my fall, but then I slid sideways, cutting and tearing my pants at the knee. I walked this way all night until a few birds started singing and faint traces of dawn turned the sky purple. Then, out of nowhere, I stumbled on this boat ramp, a sign that said Little Orleans Drive-In Camping, and next to the ramp were 2 overturned canoes. Staying low, I snuck over to the canoes. It would be a change of pace to paddle in a canoe instead of walking. Fun, too. I chose the dark green one and not the silver one because I thought the silver would draw more attention. But when I went to lift the end of the canoe, I discovered it was chained to a stake in the ground. Both canoes were chained up. Disappointed, I sat on the grass and crossed my arms. But then I had an idea. I tried moving one of the stakes back and forth, until I felt it start to get loose. I worked at it until the stake gave away and I could pull it out of the ground. Quietly, I laid the stake and chain in the green canoe, set the backpack on top of them, and started pulling the canoe across the grass. At the water's edge, I took off my boots and socks, gently placed them in the bow. Then I rolled up the bottoms of my pants, although I'm not sure why, because they were already wet. Stepping into the cold water, I felt the pull of the current. I was several feet out in the river beside the canoe when I remembered the paddles. Damn. I cast a glance backwards and scanned the area, but I didn't see any. What I did see was a police car slowly coming down the dirt road. Like a snake, I thought, sneaking out of the bushes to get me. Quickly, I ducked down and pushed the canoe out to deeper water. When I felt the water halfway up my shins, I pointed the canoe downriver and rolled over the gunwale the way a high jumper rolls over the bar. Flat on the bottom of the canoe, I curled up and stayed low, while the boat drifted down the current. The whole time I expected someone to call out to me from shore, but the only thing I ever heard was water rippling down the sides of the canoe. After a while, I sat up and discovered I was a good ways down the river, and the landing out of sight beyond a bend. Another close call. Unbelievable. Guess some people thought the river was a floating trash can, because I saw a ton of disgusting stuff there out in the water. Tires, a little kid's wading pool, a car seat cushion, tin cans, bottles, a styrofoam cooler, dirty diapers, a broom. When I saw the broom, I reached out and grabbed it. Even if I couldn't paddle with it very well, at least I had something to push the canoe off the rocks if it got stuck. I laid the broom down inside the canoe and sat for a while, watching the sun come up in the east over the trees. It was a pretty sunrise, and I wondered what the day was going to bring. But my stomach was making a lot of noise again, so food was my next order of business. Here's what I found in the backpack. 2 bottles of water, a tiny red flashlight that worked, a small box of waterproof matches, the C&O Canal Companion, a guidebook sealed in a Ziploc bag, 1 asthma inhaler, which I held in my hands a full minute before I figured out what it was. Food! 2 apricot Cliff Bars, a package of organic beef jerky, buttermilk pancake mix, a baggie full of raisins, and 1 package of dehydrated Oriental-style spicy chicken. Right off, I drank an entire bottle of water without stopping. I was so thirsty. Then I chomped down one of the Cliff Bars, swallowed a handful of raisins, and bit into one of those beefy jerky sticks, before stopping to save some of that food for later. I felt better, but I was still pretty tired from all the running. I folded up my sweatshirt and put it on the bottom of the canoe for a pillow, pulled the trucker's red hat out from the jacket pocket to lay over my face, then stretched out to rest. Now I know what a person might be thinking at that point. Like, did it bother me I broke out of prison, that I stole a tractor-trailer truck and burned up its brakes? Did I feel bad for ripping off that trucker's jacket and his knife and his hat and his $3? Was I crushed with guilt because I took someone's backpack full of food, then stole and gave their bike a flat tire? Did I ever stop to consider it wasn't very nice to uproot a chained canoe and take it down the river? The answer is no. The answer is heck no. I did not ever stop to think about whether what I was doing was right or wrong and what the consequences might be. The if/then thinking stuff. Later on I did, sure. I knew what I did was wrong, but I didn't feel awful about it because I had my reasons. No way did I have that conduct disorder thing that Miss Laurie talked about. She said if I beat up 2 kids and didn't feel guilty about it, that could be a warning sign. She tried to scare me. I know she did, by saying that if I had this disorder, I probably spent most of my life in prison and end up getting killed before I was 25 years old. But like I said, I knew I didn't have that disorder. I never beat up a kid who didn't deserve it. And let me point out that I did feel bad when I saw that asthma inhaler thing in the backpack, because I knew this girl in middle school who needed to suck on hers all the time or else she couldn't breathe. Yeah, and let me say something else too. When you're on the run, you don't stop to think about right versus wrong or what will happen if you do this or that. You sure as heck don't worry if you have a conduct disorder. No way. Because if you have heart in your heart like me and you're on the run, you don't pussyfoot around. You block everything out and keep moving in a forward direction. Straight on, man. Because your life is on the line. I don't know how else to say it. You keep moving to survive. And that's the end of chapter 7.